जो पॉइंट थे
हाँ
मेरे जो पॉइंट्स थे वो
हाँ
ठीक है। तूने बोला एक तूने पॉइंट बोला भी मैंने चश्मा नहीं पहन सकती थी लेकिन यू आर स्लॉटेड फॉर टू इवेंट्स। ठीक है, तूने हिस्टोरिकल लिंक्स भी बोला कि मॉडेशियस प्रोजेक्ट्स में बिलीव करते हैं। इंडिया मॉडेस्ट थी और इंडिया बढ़ रही है और हम भी ग्रांड करेंगे। एंड सेकेंड इज ग्रांड स्टेजेस, democratization. And what you are saying is creation of a fertile venture and entrepreneurship. ये तो दोनों कंट्रीज के भी बात है ना। इट्स नॉट वन साइडेड क्रिएशन ऑफ fertile
तो
venture
इसमें
and
जो हाँ
entrepreneur.
तो उसमें लेट मी एक्सप्लेन वन थिंग राइट। जो यूएस का जो इंडिया का सोर्स ऑफ इंस्पिरेशन रहा है राइट, दैट हैज बिन द पब्लिक। अगर आप देखो कि इंडिया की एप्स जैसे स्विगी वगैरह दे कम फ्रॉम द कॉमन पीपल राइट, whereas जो Saudi Arabia and all these countries हैं, where they've been a bit different is that the leadership has come up with the grand vision. So if you think about कि who is defining the vision, it has been right now अगर आप Saudi Arabia का देखोगे, it is MBS, right? It is he
ओके,
who has
एमबीएस
defined the
कौन है?
vision. He is the crown prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia.
ठीक है, ये सब लिख के भेजती हो। ओके,
तो
हमारे भी तो मोदी जी डिफाइन कर रहा है हमारे विजन को।
Yeah,
मेक
the
इन
first 500.
इंडिया, आत्मनिर्भर भारत।
that is all fine. What is तो जो वहाँ का ही इज डिफाइनिंग राइट, मोदी जी इज डिफाइनिंग बट ही सेज कि हमें ये करना है एंड यू नो द आइडियाज देमसेल्फ जो उनका विजन नेशनल एम्बिशन कैन कम फ्रॉम एनीवेयर, बट जो एग्जीक्यूशन लेवल विजन है दैट इज नॉट, that is coming from like that is coming from the leadership. प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि Saudi 2030 vision, तो जो विजन रहा है राइट, it is basically to reform Saudi Arabia and that and उसके तहत मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि जो जो what Saudi needs right, what Middle East needs, what GCC needs is कि जो ideas हैं वो कर रहा हूँ मैं अभी, so the audio is being recorded.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
What I'm saying is in Saudi Arabia these the national ambition is defining the entrepreneurial vision to an extent कि वहाँ पे there is a lack of baseline जो होता है, जो lower level का innovation होता है, the bottom up innovation जो होता है वो missing है to a large extent, right? And वहाँ पे there is very less like innovation when it comes from bottom up. And उस वजह से प्रॉब्लम क्या होती है that they have created this culture where they're going for the big and bold projects which have ended up using not domestic knowledge capital but knowledge capital insourced from people like the McKinseys of the world, the BCGs of the world. And उनका ये vision है. So a lot of times the international level पे criticism is कि it looks very plasticky, it looks very surface level and all. But on the other and it creates this other problem where they're not able to project their own vision onto things. On the other hand, the great thing about Saudi Arabia has been कि वो starting से ही they have been defined by audaciousness. Like उन्होंने बोला बुर्ज खलीफा बनेगा तो बनेगा, उन्होंने बोला कि लाइन सिटी बनेगा तो बनेगा. They have dumped money into desalination projects and all of that. And ये जो audaciousness है, ये जो ability to do the right thing है, that is something which is very different from any other country because of the leadership structure they have and because of the additional oil revenue they generate. तो अभी अगर आप देखोगे the world's most valuable company is Saudi Aramco, right? And because of how much money they can make from oil, they can basically subsidize innovation in the biggest, boldest things. Now the main thing is कि to create that ecosystem, they have to create that democratization of ideas, not creating a political democracy, but an economic democracy. कि जो ideas हैं वो आए लोगों से. That is the democratization I'm talking about. It is the proliferation of entrepreneurship into the next generation. They already have the risk taking in their like जो उनकी royal families हैं जो ये सब हैं, they already have the risk taking in a sense कि उनको पैसे से फर्क नहीं पड़ता. What they care about is like delivering. And that's the first point, right? That is the entire thing कि Middle East का क्या competitive edge है over India or over anywhere else. कि Saudi Arabia के पास आप जाओ, and if you take them with a real moonshot project, a real project, right? You tell them कि हम ये कर देंगे, हम desalination पे काम कर देंगे, हम biotechnology पे आगे कर देंगे, they will take it. Why? Because they can. They have that excess capital, and for them, it becomes a matter not today, but 20, 30 years from now, it becomes a matter of survival. That's the first general point. And jo second part hai, how this first was the why, right? It is understanding the cultural context. Next part is about the how. कि कौन सी stage पे आएगा GCC, right? What stage can they come in? तो एक तो immediately वो कर सकते हैं, right? It is embedding themselves in the startup ecosystems. तो वो क्या करेंगे? GCC has a lot of capital, right? They have a lot of foreign excess reserves. Ab, instead of just going through intermediaries like this World Bank, not World Bank, sorry, SoftBank, they should directly have partnerships with vetted, not just vetted, but great quality on like venture capital firms. They should try to create those LP partnerships with Indian origin के या फिर Indian type के venture firms which have been much better at due diligence, which are all about that scrappy innovation, getting things done. And जो next round होता है from round C होता है, round D होता है, what Tiger Fund was doing, what all these bigger funds were trying to do, that thing of acceleration. जो startup में there are these stages, right? First you have to have a proof of concept, then होता है आपका alpha stage, beta stage, then you have an acceleration stage, and then you finally go to market. तो जो acceleration stage है उस पे their capital can be a wonderful competitive advantage, where in that acceleration stage they can come in and they can bet on the winning startups, and that way they can create that thing ki they have a stake in innovation. And once they do this for a few years, once they understand these, like strategies of कैसे, how do you vet startups, how do you tell a good startup from a bad startup, once they create that knowledge for themselves, they can start investing within their own companies and their own countries. Also, like अगर आप startup के founder हो, right, once that you have that venture का, like once the venture class becomes educated, and at the same time parallelly what they need to do is basically create उनके देशों में educational institutions जो अभी वो कर रहे हैं, right? They will invite all these fancy universities, but it is not having as much of a real impact. The problem with that is कि एक, these universities need to be around each other and they need to have more collaboration and more participation. They need to basically just like जैसे China ने किया था, right? They had this project where they invited back PhDs into their own country after they studied abroad. Similarly, like, and for them it was a more competitive exercise, and therefore जो GCC में होना चाहिए, right? It is to create a more competitive environment. And for that, they can obviously partner not just with the American universities, but the Indian universities. जैसे IITs हैं, IIMs हैं, आपके खुद के जो knowledge partners हैं, right? And create that alternative pathway, that जो हमारा common enemy है brain drain का, जो हमारे common targets हैं, Instead of that, we create a thing जहाँ पे, because Saudi Arabia has capital, we can create a better life in our own countries. We don't have to go to the West, right? We don't have to artificially prop up their economies. We can do it to we can build a better future for ourselves. So that is what we can come in. Now, उसके अलावा the हाँ, anyway, coming to the next point basically, which is sustainability वाला part, right? Sustainability जो है, it comes from scarcity. And sustainability and economics is basically a study of scarcity. Economics का जो real definition है, it is how do you prioritize and how do you distribute resources when there are a limited number of resources. That is the core idea behind sustainability. वही है कि economics is a one time thing कि आज मैं कैसे करूँ. Sustainability is economics done over 100 years. कि how are you making sure that you live in a way that doesn't endanger your future generations. And इसमें the main thing GCC can do, right, is that it can again be patrons of research. जो patronage का concept है, GCC can really take that up a notch. And now जो उनके लिए main चीजें हैं, right, what are the main things which they should be focusing on? उनकी priorities क्या हैं? They can be the ones who change the world by being patrons of genetic engineering and biotechnology alongside desalination. Right? There are तीन चार जो मेन चीजें होती हैं दुनिया में. There it is very simple. एक होता है खाना पीना, तीसरा होता है रहना. All these things, Saudi Arabia has been dealt a very bad geographical hand in terms of उनका climate कैसा है. They're a desert with very low natural water and very bad food. And even and like, so that way what they can do is basically using the oil wealth, they can pioneer technologies in all three. They can talk about sustainable living, like how do you create hospitable living conditions in the harshest environments without using too much of energy. How do you minimize energy while doing that? What kind of city states do you create? And this is not a unique challenge. There were civilizations which are like thousands of years old. Like one of the oldest cases of windmill was not exactly in the it's not, it is from the Middle East region, albeit from a different, not part of GCC, but उसी region की हैं. These were sand based, like they had created these mud based structures, mud based houses, which were very healthy to live on, and they had their own version of windmills, which they were using to both like bring in fresh air as well as to mill grains. So it was a very advanced civilization एक point. Like the Mesopotamian जो civilization, it was very advanced and they did things like this. So I'm saying that GCC can again be patrons of all of this because they understand scarcity. Even though right now it is artificially ameliorated through oil, it is inherently there. And again, वही point है कि how do you combat against desertification? How do you ensure कि you create a meaningful supply chain in the harshest of environments? How do you pioneer genetic engineering? And maybe अगर उनको सच में audacious होना है, what about space? जो सऊदी अरेबिया and इन सब के environments हैं, they can be a perfect testing ground for space age. कि how do you आप सोच के देखो, you can create such beautiful testing grounds जो आपके स्पेस में रेत से कैसे डील करोगे, harshest environments में कैसे डील करोगे, autonomous चीज़ों से कैसे डील करोगे. India already has ISRO. It has a beautiful space agency. What about using Saudi capital and sharing that हम अपने ideas आपको देंगे, you provide us with that environment and you provide us with that unique backing. So that way we can create a lot of meaningful partnerships over here. And third thing is women empowerment का जो point है, right? Over here, a few things and there are there, right? एक तो there is this largely cultural and traditional barriers जो अभी तक रहा है within their society, right? And that is something which they have to acknowledge before they move forward, right? And the only way to overcome it is very simple, is to basically reconcile within themselves and with the society at large ki what should the role of the women be of tomorrow, right? And over here they have to understand something. Demographically they are about to collapse, like they have this demographic time bomb alongside many other countries like the West, etc. They have to be open to
Why are they going to collapse demographically? इनको क्या GCC को क्या प्रॉब्लम है?
birth rates.
क्यों इनके इनके तो ज्यादा बच्चे होते हैं ना?
नहीं, पर वुमेन बच्चे कम होते हैं.
पर मल्टीपल शादी भी तो है.
That doesn't help in population. Population का replacement होना चाहिए ना. तो अगर आप देखोगे बारेन का पॉपुलेशन जो है, बारेन हैज लेट्स 1.5 उसका जो पॉपुलेशन है, राइट? बारेन का इट इज फर्टिलिटी इज एट 1.5 जो अभी मैं देख रहा हूँ. एंड दे हैव अ ह्यूज मेल टू फीमेल स्क्यू. जैसे यूएई में देर इज दिस वेरी एक्सेसिव स्क्यू जो है. एंड आपको एक सेकंड उसका फोटो भेज.
रेशियो एडवर्स है क्या?
क्या
सेक्स रेशियो एडवर्स है क्या?
sex ratio adverse है, plus they have a very bad skew in terms of their population. Let me send it to you.
ये मेरे को थोड़ा सा भेज दे. बहुत बड़ा आर्टिकल मत भेजना कि पॉइंट्स मिल
आपको
जाए.
फोटो भेजना. Do you see the problem? मैं आपको 2 फोटोज भेजी. If you look at it.
पढ़ के सुना दे.
अबे फोटोज हैं.
अच्छा. और बता. तो मतलब कम है
क्या?
विमेन इनकी कम है मेल के अगेंस्ट में.
हाँ, women एक तो कम है. दूसरा it is about कि like you know like it is about the gender roles themselves, right? कि what are the gender roles which they want them to play in the future. And वो जब उनको reconcile करना पड़ेगा, and that is not an external dialogue anyone else can have for them, right? It is an internal dialogue which has to come from within. उसमें that is something where women empowerment can only happen when culturally they are accepting. And अगर नहीं करना चाहते हैं, that is all. Again, it is not our place to say what is right and what is wrong on behalf of some other sovereign country which has a different sovereign vision. But it seems like Joe, they are taking a few steps, right? कि they are talking about more inclusion. Again, Vision 2030 जो है उसका MBS का, it talks about more power, etc. And that is something which is which again it just happens with baby steps in the right place. But it is a real conversation which they have to have. And one of the things I noticed was आपका जो panel है, right? उसमें कितने women लोग हैं? Not from India but from GCC. How many women have they invited for this women empowerment panel who are also women? And अगर आपके panels में ही women नहीं है तो बाकी लोगों को कैसे representation मिलेगा?
There is another panel of women leadership जिसमें कई सारी औरतें हैं. I don't know उन countries में है या इधर उधर.
नहीं, look at your own panel.
इसमें relevant point के बाकी expert panel क्यूड है.
हाँ.
है ना?
Yeah. And इसमें the thing has to be जैसे like what creates opportunities for women is very simple, right? It is basically आपको education, आपको एक तो एक culturally they should be accepted. Once you have the cultural of acceptance, then it becomes about women को आप opportunities the education की इन सब की उन सब की, and that is the main thing. But the main impediment to all of this is going to be culture, and it is about that internal cultural dialogue. And यहाँ पे maybe you can talk about India का कुछ, because I think आपको ज़्यादा पता होगा, like सावित्री बाई फूले का या ऐसा कुछ, या झांसी रानी का, whoever you think is the right person जो उनके साथ jive करेगा. You can talk about the Indian journey because India also went through that painful process, right? Where we went from like having a lot of modernity in our culture, जो colonialism का point है. We had, if you look at the example of Shakuntala, initially it was about this strong tribal woman, then who was fighting for her right for her son to be the next king against the present king. Then it under the British Empire, it became very different. It became about this, like this sort of this virgin, tribal innocent woman जिसको एक राजा ने उसके साथ रहा, and then there was some magical element of spell casting and forgetfulness, and and कुछ memory था कि राजा was also innocent because उसके ऊपर भी जादू था, this person is also innocent, and there is some magical मछली जिसकी अंगूठी से वो transformation आया दोनों में. So it becomes a very, like, it's a very trite story about, and has elements of European romanticism, and that European romanticism and their view of gender roles has created a skewed sense of the gender roles, right? Because that is what happened, at least within India. And it took us a lot of time and effort and reformers to get where we are today. And इसका जो वैल्यू है, राइट, द मेन वैल्यू ऑफ रिप्रेजेंटेशन एंड डाइवर्सिटी एंड इंक्लूजन इज नॉट कि लाइक एक तो आपका इमीडिएट जो रहता है, राइट, इट इज़ योर लेबर पूल जो है, इट डबल्स बिना कुछ करे. If women have equal rights, then your labor pool becomes from one, like it doubles immediately, because if you give women the opportunity to work. दूसरा जो मेजर पॉइंट रहता है, it is that the more inclusion you have, the more diverse viewpoints you will have, the more diversity of thought you will have, the more innovation you will have. And ये जो spirit of, like, it becomes only evident जब आप collaboration के spaces बनाओगे, and when you create this environment of collaboration. And that is one of those things. So this is the point about empowerment. But again, मैं इस पे इतना नहीं जानता, आपको I think ज़्यादा पता होगा as a women leader वगैरह वगैरह. But this is my outside in. उसके अलावा जो रोल ऑफ गवर्नमेंट है, राइट, रोल ऑफ जो गवर्नमेंट है, इट्स वेरी सिंपल. बहुत सिंपल रोल है, बट इट्स वेरी क्रूशल. एक तो यार बढ़िया यूनिवर्सिटीज़ होनी चाहिए. दूसरा, मेक फेयर रूल्स, इम्पोज देम फेयरली होना चाहिए. थर्ड, मेकिंग श्योर दैट यू हैव अ गुड रिलेशनशिप विद अदर कंट्रीज. लाइक अगर आप ईरान की तरह इडियट हो, राइट, या नॉर्थ कोरिया हो, you, no matter how brilliant the entrepreneur in North Korea is, he will get, because of sanctions he can't do business, right? So you have to make sure that you're in good standing with other leaders and other people, and creating an ecosystem which is pro entrepreneurs and pro VC. And finally होता है कि you have to provide a quality of life which is great. नहीं तो what happens is, if you create a class of rich people, right, rich people will migrate to the best location, just as factories migrate to people with cheapest labor. You have to create an ecosystem which has inherent advantages which are outside cost, which are actually related to standard of living. It is related to the kind of vibrancy of the environment and all of that. Then उसके अलावा second thing is GCC जो है, because it suffers from inherent bad geography, right? It has to create clusters of of human capital, right? It has to consolidate the human capital. And इसमें the main point is how can we create alongside India, how can we create exchange meetings, right? कि महीने में साल में 2-3 बार you have these like GCC and India के साथ collaboratively done partnerships. You have more research projects together. You have all of these things. Exchange programs हैं आपके within GCC and with India. And they attract the best talent to do research within GCC, to do that in collaboration with India, and allow that intermixing of ideas not between जो आप immigrants ला रहे हो, but also within their own population. How do you create more interfaces between your local GCC population and the people who come there to work? Abhi right now their entire population is जो लोग आते हैं, right? GCC में लोग रहने काम करने आते हैं. They live separately from the Saudis and from the local Middle Eastern people, and that creates this thing जहाँ पे if you don't mix, you won't get the advantages of diversity. The advantages of diversity comes when two different people meet, and you have two different ideas pool mixing. So how do you create that without, of course they have a concern कि उनकी population कम है, and they are 10% of the population and migrants are 90% in Qatar's case. So how do you create this thing where your national identity is not lost? Right? So you create these experiments with allowing the ideas mixing up. कि अगर आपके कंपनीज हैं, अगर आपके फर्म्स हैं, अगर आपके पार्टीज हैं, how do you create this space where different people can come? And I found this in Cornell, where I was part of like I went for some parties, and वहाँ पे one of them was with the Middle Eastern वाले people. It was some Muslim club or whatever, and मैं वहाँ पे गया हुआ था अपने board game night or whatever के लिए. And वहाँ पे I was talking to these Middle Eastern people, and they're some of the nicest people. It's just that it is about how do you mix those up. And the sad thing about that night was that there was no one except, like, I was the only one of the only non GCC people there. The other person who was there was like Afghani, and like the other third guy was maybe Pakistani, but there was no one really from the other communities. Like there was no other Indian, there was no other person from Africa or white or Chinese person. Whereas when I went for these other things, जैसे कोई Japanese festival था वहाँ पे, there were so many other people. Like it was not done in one random club room. It was done in front of everyone, in front of the gym, which is one of the most public areas. And it was an open invitation for everyone to come and participate. So ये जो inclusivity of ideas होता है, that needs to happen. It needs to push for that inclusivity, and it has to come up with the cornerstone of what creates their own identity, and create like a mind map of उस identity से बाहर, using that as a grounding principle of our identity. How can we go out and interact with other people? So that is one of those things. Then outward facing is very simple कि हमारे को beneficial deals होनी चाहिए. We have to be in great, like these small steps जो वो कर रहे हैं, right? Today you are going to GCC. What can you offer them today, right? You are a department of जो आपका department है skill development का, जो आपका human capital का department है. How can they leverage it today to create more relationship between Maharashtra and them? Right? Things like that. Creating those partnerships, creating those deals at a government level, then allowing it to facilitate in उनके citizens के लिए क्या चाहिए उन्हें. Third is VC firms वाला जो point मैंने आपको initially बताया था, जो उनका सऊदी फंड है, it invested into SoftBank. उसके अलावा they should they
What
sh-
is SoftBank?
so there is this Japanese entrepreneur called Masayoshi Son. He created this world's largest fundraising of hundreds of billions of dollars into this venture capital, not venture capital, but investment firm called SoftBank. अब उनका वो क्या करते हैं, they go to these startups जैसे Uber वगैरह, and they buy huge stakes in them and they invest in it. And Masayoshi Son and SoftBank are known for कि हम radical innovations करेंगे, we will innovate for the time period of 400 years and all of this audacious things. प्रॉब्लम उस बंदे का क्या है कि he has been lucky a few times and he's very charismatic and उसकी वजह से like at least a few years back he was very hyped up, then he had very public failures, but that is the context of SoftBank. So basically they invested through they gave him a lot of money when he was at the height of his hypeness. जैसे बेसिकली फाइनेंस में हर एक दो साल में देर इज वन पर्सन हु बिकम्स हाइप. जैसे ड्यूरिंग कोविड इन अमेरिका में कैथी वुड वाज द हाइप वुमन. उससे पहले मासायोशी सोन वाज द हाइप पर्सन. तो ऐसे साइकिल्स होते हैं इन फाइनेंस में. व्हाट दे नीड टू डू इज ब्रेक आउट ऑफ साइकिल्स एंड इन्वेस्ट. वो एक चीज़ होती है, राइट. इट्स अ वेरी सिंपल सेइंग जो फुटबॉल से आती है. Form is temporary, class is permanent.
Form is temporary. What is permanent?
Class is permanent.
Okay.
जैसे लाइक प्लेयर लाइक शिखर धवन है, वो मार देगा दो चार चौके एक मैच में, बट तेंदुलकर इज तेंदुलकर, राइट. द्राविड इज द्राविड. दैट इज काइंड ऑफ द सेंटिमेंट कि जो आप ये they are going after these big flashy name investors, but instead maybe they should focus on creating partnerships, real partnerships with Khosla Ventures, Sequoia, Andreessen and Horowitz, and Indian जो भी आपके, मेरे को अमेरिकन वालों का पता है, जो भी इंडियन वाला बंदा होगा उसके दो तीन नाम लिख देना इसकी जगह. एंड उसमें लाइक हाउ डू यू क्रिएट दिस कल्चर ऑफ इनोवेशन. जैसे मे बी विद इन द सऊदी रॉयल फैमिली और द रॉयल फैमिलीज जो उनकी हैं, द रिच पीपल हैं, मे बी इंस्टेड ऑफ बोस्टिंग अबाउट द टाइगर्स दे हैव or the cars they have, maybe they boast about which startups have they invested in. Like create a GCC wide challenge partnerships कि who is the best investor, किसके investments have the best returns, and creating those internal competitions where they become inspired to invest. And इसमें the only thing is they have to make sure that the things they are investing in are great companies, and उसके लिए they can partner with the great venture firms. So that is the thing. जो third point होता है, the next point is quality of life. Quality of life is pretty self-explanatory.
हाँ बेटा.
Next point जो है that is quality of life. क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ में बहुत सिंपल सी चीज़ है यार. रहने के लिए जगह बढ़िया होनी चाहिए, खाना पानी बढ़िया होना चाहिए, मज़े के लिए चीज़ें होनी चाहिए, एंड फाइनली लाइक इट्स लाइक कम से कम झंझट होना चाहिए ऑन सिंपल थिंग्स. Like US में, it's not like I hate the country, but there are a few things which rub me the wrong way. Their healthcare system is atrocious. Their housing के लिए it is kind of bad, not that bad. मैंने जो देखा है, it is pretty bad. And third is ये visa का cricket. It is such an idiotic and dumb process. GCC, India, all these countries should look at the US and learn what not to do from it. उनको देखना चाहिए, उनको करना चाहिए, and they should make a better India and better GCC. Just do the basic things right and you'll have a good time. जैसे कैलिफोर्निया में अभी कितना ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम्स हैं. कैलिफोर्निया हैज हैड अ पॉपुलेशन डिक्लाइन फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम. उन्होंने दे लॉस्ट पॉपुलेशन बिकॉज देर आर दीज थिंग्स जो उनके बिग सिटीज आई थिंक सैन फ्रांसिस्को वगैरह. वहाँ पे होमलेसनेस का इतना प्रॉब्लम है कि लोग बोलते हैं सड़क पे टट्टी है. एंड वहाँ पे लाइक देर आर पेट्रोल्स जो टट्टी साफ करते हैं सड़क पे से. एंड इट्स नॉट, इट शुडंट बी अ फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड इशू फॉर द वेल्दिएस्ट कंट्री इन द वर्ल्ड, बट है. यूरोप में जो चार्ली हेब्डो वगैरह के बाद हुआ, दैट अंडरस्टैंडिंग की इस्लाम, लाइक दे आर डीपली स्टिल अ रेसिस्ट कंट्री. European made racism is still alive. Look at what happened with this player Mesut Özil. Look at what happens with people like the treatment of Paul Pogba and the French football team. जहाँ पे उन्होंने कह रखा है, when we lose a match we are Africans, when we win the World Cup we are French. So all these countries have a very racial undertone thing. So they're not great places to live as such. But why are still people trying to immigrate to them? So why not create a more welcoming and beautiful environment back home जब आप कर सकते हो? They have, like Middle East has such a rich culture. Like उनका अगर traditional culture देखोगे, अपना India has such a beautiful history and culture. We can also do that. So that's quality of life. And you can talk about how इन सब चीज़ों के लिए you can tell them I am giving you an open offer. आप आओ इंडिया में, I will make sure that you stay in the beautiful places जो आपके महाराष्ट्र resorts हैं. You will take them around, you will show them that thing. And for quality of life, right, that beautiful sharing of experiences, right? जैसे one of the best things I like to do is I sometimes take my Gora dost and take them to Indian places and tell them about Indian food and my understanding of Indian thing and ask them how they see it. Right? How does it, like just say I was talking to this friend about which is better, African food or Indian food, and hear about how he thinks of African, how we use spices, how they use spices, things like that. And that richness creates a very beautiful dialogue.
Hmm.
And another point is about the Dutch disease. जो Dutch disease है, it's this really messed up economic idea कि जब आपके एक सेक्टर ऑफ इकोनॉमी कम सो स्ट्रॉन्ग कि इट बेसिकली इंश्योर्स कि कोई और सेक्टर कांट वर्क पॉसिबली. क्यों? क्योंकि अगर आपका एक सेक्टर इतना, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल विद देयर ऑयल, राइट, let's say I'm an engineer in oil and gas and I make $200,000 a year, and I'm a computer scientist for logistics company and I make 50,000 a year. Where would I want to work? I will obviously pick the oil and gas jobs. So the smartest people get attracted to this thing. At a larger macro level, जो आपके exports होते हैं, right? They become so driven by one commodity that your entire economic machine optimizes for that commodity. So instead of having जैसे LNG है, right? अभी Germany में they were so dependent on Nord Stream for supplies that they don't have LNG terminals, so they can't take LNG from elsewhere else. They're reliant on the Russian gas supply. तो वैसे ही this creates this dependence जो होती है, it skews your economic machine, and that skewedness prevents any other sector from becoming prevalent. एंड इसमें जो डच डिजीज होता है उसमें देर इज ऑल्सो वेरी बैड इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स जो आपकी करेंसी होती है उसको रैक कर देते हैं. सो नॉर्मली व्हाट हैपेंस इज अगर आपका एक्सपोर्ट इम्पोर्ट्स, लेट्स से यू आर इन नेट इम्पोर्टर कंट्री, राइट, यू आर इम्पोर्टिंग समथिंग, यू एक्सपोर्टिंग समथिंग. तो उसमें जब डेफिसिट बढ़ने लगता है तो आपकी करेंसी डीवैल्यू होने लगती है. एंड जो डीवैल्यूमेंट होती है दैट इज पुश्ड अप बाय एक्सपोर्ट्स. जैसे जैसे आपकी कंट्री करेंसी डीवैल्यू होगी, योर प्रोडक्ट्स बिकम चीपर, सो पीपल स्टार्ट स्विचिंग एंड बाइंग योर प्रोडक्ट्स, एंड दैट क्रिएट्स दिस थिंग कि आपकी इकोनॉमी वापस ऑन ट्रैक हो जाती है. व्हेन यू हैव द डच डिजीज, उनका जो ऑयल है वो इतना बेच देंगे कि देयर कंट्री नेवर हैज अ चांस to devalue its currency, and because they can't devalue their currency, बाकी के इनके जो products हैं जैसे dates, chocolates, इत्र, all of these cannot be sold on the market, not to the level they can be. So that is one problem which they can solve through diversification and gaining competitive advantages in these niche fields. जैसे जो मैं इनोवेशन की बात कर रहा था, desalination हो गया. If they create the best desalination systems in the world, there will be very few other competitors. If they create genetic engineering में ऐसी crops which can stand desertification, अगर Monsanto को वो छोड़ देंगे पीछे, all of these things if they perfect, they can really shape, they can create competitive advantages around technologies which need just human capital and not natural resources. दूसरा, these are technologies which have such a high markup. जैसे ASML है, it is the world's only company located in Netherlands which makes deep ultraviolet वो machines, and एक machine की cost है hundreds of millions of dollars, around 150 $200 million की एक machine आती है उनकी, and they are a monopoly on this technology and on this creation of this technology, and उनके ऊपर इतना they have such influence कि US tells them कि यार चाइना में ये कर दो, चाइना में के साथ वो कर दो, डोंट डील विद चाइना, एंड दे स्टिल हैव द थिंग कि वो चाइना को एक जनरेशन पहले मशीन बेच देते हैं. So if you create unique technologies and unique technological advantages and unique technological investments, they will create their own, they will gain a lot of influence from that. So that is one more thing जो उनको आपको बतानी है. So yeah, these are the points that touch disease वाला and बाकी सब.
Okay,
बस.
that is quite that is quite useful.
Hmm.
Today to identify here desalination, biotech और जेनेटिक ये सब कहीं लिखी हुई है, कहीं किसी के रिसर्च पेपर में, या तू ये अपने दिमाग से बोलता है?
I mean ये obvious चीज़ें हैं. वो उनके पास पानी नहीं है तो they should work on desalination. उनके पास they are located in a desert, so they should focus on genetic engineering and food manufacturing. And उनका internally their trade is outward facing, so they should look at internal development of trade. And उसके अलावा जो space वाला है, that is completely I pulled it out of my ass, because space is something which I don't know how much advantage of. I mean, it really comes down to whether they are audacious enough or not. But India is the right partner, because India has the most efficient technology, and when you marry the most efficient with capital, right? And when you have the right vision, you can create the best sort of pathway for progress. बट उसका देर इज नो इमीडिएट एडवांटेज, तो मैंने इसलिए कुछ नहीं उस पर लिखा. But other than that, like one other thing you can possibly mention is that US जो है, right? US Saudi जो relationship है, US Middle East जो relationship है, that was often designed around 2-3 points of partnership, right? First point was oil, right? The petrodollars and oil. कि oil जब तक valuable है, Saudi is valuable. दूसरा, which comes directly from this, defense, where defense was basically outsourced to the US and US companies. अब उससे प्रॉब्लम क्या होगी is that you're creating an unhealthy relationship with America, and America has invested into fracking and all these technologies which reduce the value of Saudi Arabia for them in the long term. आज के केस में सऊदी का जो ऑयल है, आई थिंक दे कैन मैन्युफैक्चर एट अराउंड $13 to $15 इन अ बैरल, whereas अमेरिकन वाला जो है, their break even price is north of $40-50, डिपेंडिंग ऑन कौन सा वाला स्पेसिफिक ड्रिल आप लेते हो. तो therefore Saudi Arabia has still a competitive advantage. But as the need for oil reduces through shifting of energy grids and better performance equipment जो होता है उनका, the need जो ये natural value of oil है वो drop करेगी. And once that drops
अभी
sufficiently,
तो
Saudi.
बहुत सारे अभी तो बहुत सारी कंट्रीज ऑल्टरनेटिव फ्यूल पे भी जा रही हैं.
हाँ, but मैं बोल रहा हूँ that's not today. That is 15, 20, 30 years from now. Right? You're right. I'm just saying कि वो आज की story नहीं है, वो future, वो medium term story है. It is like कि एक ज़माने में मछुआरे when civilization started, food resources were the most important. So you protected your pasture lands, you protected your गाय भैंस, and you protected your fisheries. Today इन सबसे ज़्यादा important है आपके critical resources and your data. And ये जो digital bridge वाला point है, you can talk about how Middle East वगैरह में, if you go to all these if you go through these airports and all, you will see ads for Alibaba. At least जब मैं गया था, I had a layover and I saw the ads for Ali Cloud, and they have to understand something. Should Who do you trust with your data? Who is the country whose value aligns with yours? I think India has that unique position through our non-alignment movement, through our historical thing, जहाँ पे people can trust us with their data. We are more trustworthy than China. We are more trustworthy than the US because US वाले कमीने हैं. They will come after you, right? US वाले are known for spying, manipulating, etc. with their data. China is known for doing that. India is not. So they should look to create those GCC based and India based collaborative cloud partnerships of partnerships in AI and ML and ये सब technologies. That creates the digital bridge wala thing. Also, like the US sanctions have showed that US is going to weaponize its SWIFT systems. SWIFT जो उनका banking system है, it is willing to weaponize all of these things. So you, they should think about maybe creating alternative systems of trade and greater collaboration with India so that bilateral trades can happen within local currencies, which can circumvent a possible misuse of things like the SWIFT network.
What network?
SWIFT. It is a international. ये basically ये जो अब finance में जो है, there are in international banking में, like transactions are done over Swift communication network.
Right.
अभी यूएस जो वॉर हुई थी, तो यूएस imposed sanctions on Russia and they banned Russian banks and Russian affiliate banks from using the Swift network, and they have ordered second third order sanctions. That means कि अगर आपका, so I may not be dealing with a person, but अगर if someone I know deals with them, I will also get sanctioned. Second order, third order sanctions. That has created a very messed up situation for Russian economy. And it has shown that Joe Swift, it was supposed to be a neutral thing only for trade, right? In Swift, this is the first time they have they have weaponized the Swift network. And all these countries like GCC and all these blocks should be thinking about creating bilateral alternatives. And India can be one of those pioneers of this technology. India is already proving its ground through RuPay and all of that कि हम fintech में boss हैं. Now, how does India take that endemic Indian technology of RuPay and all of that and turn it into an international competitive advantage and creating that a safe, neutral ecosystem of banking? And it doesn't have to be international right now. It can just be collaborative right now with GCC. So yeah, these are the main talking points.
ग्रेट.
बाल मैं इतना ब्रिलियंट हूँ यार.
तूने रिकॉर्ड किए.
हाँ, आई थिंक रिकॉर्ड किया है. लेट मी जस्ट चेक ऑडियो इसका बचता है कि नहीं.
मेरा टाइम है 10 मिनट.